I don't feel any negative emotion. There's only joy. What's going on in my house?
So, while the current Steven Universe hiatus has taken its toll on me, I've been trying to binge other shows that I haven't seen before to fill the hole and pass the time. And there are a lot of really good shows out there right now. Tuca and Birdie, The Owl House, BoJack Horseman, just a lot of really good shows that I've thoroughly enjoyed watching and preoccupying myself with. However, none of those shows really filled the star-shaped hole in my heart that Steven Universe had left. Until recently. And of course, because it's me, I had to end up hyperfixating on the show with the most complicated production process and the most confusing licensing and release schedule, Miraculous Ladybug, Tales of Ladybug and Chat Noir. And you guys thought that Steven Universe had it bad with its hiatuses. Since I've never actually talked about Miraculous Ladybug on this channel, I'm going to start off with a little backstory on what it is. Then we're going to get into the mess that is the production of the show, because to be frank, I honestly just find it really interesting and I thought that it would be fun to make a video on it. Anyways, Miraculous Ladybug is a 3D animated cartoon about, you guessed it, two superheroes named Ladybug and Chat Noir. They protect Paris from the evil Hawkmoth, who manipulates those with strong emotions by turning them into villains with butterflies that he calls Akuma. These Akuma give the victims superpowers, which are usually based on whatever led to them being akumatized in the first place. So, for example, a troubled artist may have the ability to bring their drawings to life, and someone who feels ignored and dislikes their appearance may have the power to make others look like them. These powers are usually intended to fix a problem that the akumatized victim has, which is why Hawkmoth is so easily able to manipulate them. In exchange for giving them powers, he asks for one thing in return, that they steal Ladybug and Chat Noir's Miraculous, giving them to him. Combined, these two objects can grant the user one wish. What Hawkmoth's wish is would be a major spoiler, so we're not going to get into that territory. All you need to know is that if Hawkmoth were to obtain these two Miraculous, there would be a massive price to pay in exchange for his wish. Hence why it's so important that our two main characters never falter and slip up. As seen in episodes like Cat Blanc, it's very possible that doing so could lead to the end of the world. Oh yeah, and there's also this ridiculous romantic plight where Marinette, who is Ladybug, is in love with Adrien, but Adrien isn't in love with Marinette. However, Adrien, who is Chat Noir, is in love with Ladybug, but Ladybug isn't in love with Chat Noir. And despite figuring out and nearly figuring out their identities on multiple occasions, they still can't recognize each other, even when they're literally in costume right in front of each other with their masks off. God, I love this show, but man, sometimes it makes me want to pull my hair out. But if there's one thing that's more frustrating than this unfortunate love square, it's the production of the show. Now that you know the basics, it's time to get into the confusion and frustration that is the production and licensing issues of Miraculous Ladybug. Miraculous Ladybug was created by French animator Thomas Ostruck and produced by Jeremy Zag and Zag Animation Studios. The concept and idea of Miraculous itself was actually announced back in 2010, but as a bare-bones concept. In fact, Adrien originally wasn't even meant to be Chat Noir. At first, his now cousin Felix had that title. Adrien only came in much, much later once the show's plans were more concrete. Speaking of changing around a lot of important aspects of the show, those of you who are longtime fans know that it wasn't always set to be a 3D animated cartoon. Originally, back in 2012, there was a 2D animated promotion for the show that was done by Zagtoon, Method, and Toy Animation. This promotion was very anime-esque and looks nothing like what the show would end up being. Unfortunately, while this promotion was a huge success, it quickly became evident to the animation studios working on Miraculous that it just wouldn't be feasible. Ladybug herself was much too difficult to animate in 2D with her spots, and it ended up creating a strobing effect. The best way to fix this problem was to switch the animation from 2D to 3D. With 3D animation, it made it much more easier to keep track of Ladybug's spots, since there was now a model they were animating instead of having a hard time keeping track of the spots in frame-by-frame hand-drawn 2D. And this was the first of many, many hurdles that the series would need to overcome. With the switch to 3D animation, they needed to find new studios to work with. They ended up partnering with a South Korean-based animation studio, SAMG, which joined production in November of 2012. The switch from 2D to 3D was later announced in 2013, letting fans know that the project was still ongoing. Looking at the original announcement of the animation style change, fans seem to be less than happy about the decision. In addition to hiring SAMG for animation, they also had a deal with SK Broadband, another South Korean-based company. Because of this deal, SK Broadband had exclusive rights in South Korea for video-on-demand release. And despite Miraculous Ladybug being a French cartoon, it actually aired in South Korea first. Miraculous Ladybug's first episode, Stormy Weather, aired in South Korea on September 1st, 2015. The first episode had its debut in France on October 19th, 2015, and the United States had their debut on Nickelodeon on December 6th, 2015. Now, you may have noticed I said Miraculous aired on Nickelodeon, and no, that was not an error on my part. Remember when I said the licensing and distribution of the show got messy? Well, this is where it gets a little bit into that. Nickelodeon only had Miraculous Ladybug in their schedule until 2016, so realistically, they only had airing rights to the show for around a year. After Nickelodeon, on April 8th, 2019, the series was officially picked up by Disney Channel. But that's not all, because earlier on December 20th of 2016, Zach announced that Netflix had acquired the US video-on-demand streaming rights to Miraculous for seasons 1 through 3, including the English premiere of the Christmas special. So not only has this show been on Nickelodeon and Disney, but you can watch all of the episodes from season 1 to season 3 on Netflix right now if you wanted to. Funny enough, the second part of season 3 just got released on February 1st of 2020. As far as I'm aware, Disney also still has streaming rights to Miraculous. Looking at my local TV schedule, it seems to have the 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. time block on Saturdays and Sundays. So it's streaming live on Disney Channel, but can only be streamed online by Netflix. Despite that, if you go to Disney now, you can actually still watch the season 2 episodes Captain Hard Rock, Zombazoo, Siren, The Dark Owl, and Robustus. I'm not sure if that's a mistake on their part, but I still think it's pretty funny how inconsistent it is. There was also another television station called Kids Click, owned by the Sinclair Broadcast Group, that used to own the streaming rights as well before Disney Channel did. But that was discontinued as of March 31st, 2019, which is why Disney then obtained the rights to air it later in 2019. Needless to say, this series has been handed around a lot, from Nickelodeon to Kids Click to Netflix and then to Disney. Unfortunately, that isn't the only handing off that happened with this series. Like with a lot of animated shows, Miraculous Ladybug needs multiple animation studios to meet their demand for episode production. With Steven Universe, for example, they use Rough Draft Korea and Sunman Image Pictures. This is common practice in terms of animated media, and it doesn't deviate from the norm. Miraculous Ladybug has 4 main studios that they hire for animation: SAMG, which I mentioned earlier, Symbiosis Studio, DQ Entertainment, and Assemblage. Now, I say this is somewhat messy simply for the fact that only 2 of these animation studios still work on the show. Symbiosis was fired for an unknown reason, and it was revealed fairly recently that SAMG will not be returning to work on seasons 4 and onward. Now, it's not known why SAMG stopped production on the show, or if they left on their own accord or were fired. All we know is that their last episodes were Heart Hunter and Miracle Queen. As far as Symbiosis goes as their reason for being fired, there's only rumors. And because there's rumors, I'm not going to spread anything. The only important thing that you need to know is that the last episode that they worked on was Star Train. This has led to a lot of fans being concerned for the future of the series, since SAMG was widely known and accepted as the best animation studio working on the show, as well as the one that's been on the show the longest. They have the best textures and the best lighting. Generally, when ranking the studios that are working on the show, the consensus from best to worst seems to be SAMG, Assemblage, Symbiosis, and then DQ. Since Assemblage and DQ are the studios left working on the show, that does raise some cause for concern. That being said, what a lot of people don't know is that DQ animated Cat Blanc, which is a fandom favorite. It just shows that they are capable of making episodes that look good, contrary to fandom belief. I personally think it's a bit too soon to say that the show is only going to degrade in quality from this point forward, only because SAMG has left. It's sad that they're leaving, and they also by far animated some of the best looking episodes, but it's not the end all be all. Though, speaking of things that did end, let's talk about the show's cancelled projects and ongoing projects, because this is where it really starts getting a little bizarre. Now, every big franchise has its fair share of cancelled projects and pretty bizarre projects. That said, Miraculous isn't really at the point that you would think it has as many of these weird projects as it does. But oh boy, does it. Following the trend of turning animated properties into live action, once upon a time, there was a live-action Miraculous Ladybug movie. So back in 2016, the movie was first revealed during a behind-the-scenes YouTube video posted by user Linda Lee Rose. It was also later confirmed to be in production at the Miraculous panel at Anime Expo 2016. According to Jeremy Zag, the movie was going to cover Ladybug and Chat Noir's origins, as well as how they fell in love. The movie was also supposed to be distributed by Lionsgate, which is a pretty well-known and respected entertainment company. The movie was slated for 2019, but was soon after pushed back to a release of 2020. They even had Michael Gracie, the director of The Greatest Showman, working on the film. However, at CCXP 2018, it was confirmed that the film was no longer in production and was being replaced by an animated musical. The name of that musical is Ladybug and Chat Noir Awakening. It's set to release sometime in late 2020 and serves as somewhat of a recap movie. Supposedly, it canonically takes place both during and after Season 4 and 5, as it is supposed to be an end to Season 5. All the main plot points are supposed to be wrapped up by the end of the movie, so depending on the demand, it could be the end of the main canonical show and the start of another main storyline, possibly leading into whoever becomes the second Hawkmoth that was hinted at in the episode Time Tagger. But then, and there's always a then, in October of 2019, it was announced that the live-action film is still in production, is filming in Los Angeles, and will be released in 2021. So there's just a lot of back and forth, and I honestly don't think anyone really knows what's going on right now. Is the movie canceled? Is it replaced? Is it still in production? I don't know, but there's a lot of conflicting information. However, there isn't just one live-action project for this series. Oh no, there's also a live-action show as well, though this project is much more under wraps than the two movies that are currently in production. Basically, all we know about the series at this point is that it's produced by Zag and Skydance Media. Some sources say that this TV show is slated to air in 2020, so I'm not really sure what happened to it. There hasn't been any word on it being canceled, but there also hasn't been any progress released to the public about it either. We don't even know if it's rehashing the canon plot or if it's something different. We just know that it exists. But considering we knew about this since September of 2018, I think it's a bit concerning that we've heard nothing else about it at this point. That said, we're moving on to some of the more obscure and weirder projects. Did y'all know there's a theme park? Yeah. An entire theme park. This was announced right as I was doing research for this video, and I couldn't be more stunned. Apparently, there's a Miraculous Ladybug theme park that's coming to China. I guess it makes sense. The show itself has a lot of Chinese influence, especially with the Kwami being clear parallels to the Chinese zodiac. Also, the main character, Marinette, is half Chinese. That said, finding out an entire theme park is being built around this show gave me whiplash. Almost just as much as when I found out that there's also a Johnny Test theme park in Quebec at the Granby Zoo. You really can't make this stuff up. Because this was just announced, we don't really have any information on it at all other than, oh, it's happening. That seems to be a very, very common thing when it comes to Miraculous Ladybug. Not knowing anything about it other than it exists and is coming. Eventually. I really gotta start getting into shows that are more upfront about their release dates and future projects. Anyways, something else that was weird that I noticed was the episode order. So I'm just gonna be upfront with you guys. I'm a fairly new Miraculous fan. I binged the entire thing back in December of 2019, and I only really became aware of how messed up the behind-the-scenes production is a month or so ago. Now, if you're like me and you watched the show in the actual episode order, which is how you would probably think you were supposed to do it, you were probably confused for a lot of your binge. So the very first episode, at least in Netflix order, is The Bubbler. And while to its credit, I guess isn't confusing and is easy to follow for the most part, we don't get an origin episode until episodes 15 and 16, which is about mid-season 1, the last episode of the season being episode 26. This episode introduces how Ladybug and Chat Noir met, how they got their powers, what Kwamis are, etc. You know, all the things that are necessary to understanding the central construct for this entire show. I didn't have anyone to tell me to watch these episodes first, so I was incredibly confused when I got midway through the first season and was then given an explanation that I desperately needed when I first started watching. So if you're thinking about getting into Miraculous Ladybug, please remember to watch episodes 15 and 16 first. Trust me, it's going to make things so much easier for you. That said, that ordering I can excuse. It's the episode ordering in later seasons that it really starts messing with and confuses you. For the most part, Miraculous can be watched in any order, with the exception of any plot-heavy episodes or episodes that introduce new Miraculous holders like Carapace, Rena Rouge, etc. Unfortunately, the actual official episode order doesn't seem to follow that logic. For example, in Season 3, Episode 11, Party Crasher, you see two Miraculous holders that you haven't even been introduced to yet. You see Pegasus and Viperion, but this is the first time you see these two, and you haven't gotten introduction episodes for them at this point. But then in Season 3, Episode 19, Desperada, you have Viperion's origin story, and in Season 3, Episode 20, Star Train, you have Pegasus's origin story. The ordering is very messed up, and I remember being incredibly confused about how these two Miraculous holders were even chosen in the first place. Because generally, when a Miraculous holder is chosen, you have an episode based on the reason why they were chosen. Also, for some reason, a two-part episode was split up. So the Season 2 episodes, The Queen's Battle Part 1 and The Queen's Battle Part 2, are split apart by one episode, which is called Troublemaker. It's just kind of sandwiched in the middle of those two, and it doesn't make any sense whatsoever because The Queen's Battle Part 1 and The Queen's Battle Part 2 happen directly after each other, so it's all just very strange. Another thing that's kind of confusing is the release schedule of the show. I know that this probably is in part to the show being native to France and not the United States, but it's very difficult to find out when this show has new episodes that are set to air. Season 1 of the show had new episodes from 2015 until late 2016. Season 2 went from 2017 to 2018, and Season 3 was only in December of 2018 and then continued into 2019. Season 4 is said to be released this year, 2020, sometime in the fall. We don't really have a release date, we just know it's sometime in the fall and winter months of this year, and with SAMG leaving, we're not really sure if that could affect the production time at all. There's also Season 5, which not only is already confirmed and greenlit, but is also set to air sometime in 2021. For that reason, we don't have an anticipated time of year, though if I had to guess if both seasons are currently in production, which they are, it'll be similar to how Seasons 2 and 3 aired one right after another, especially since the movie is set to be released in 2021, and it happens post-Season 5 in terms of the canonical timeline. At least I would hope that, unlike some of their episodes, they wouldn't release these things out of order. In terms of complications, I think that's about it. I'm still rather new to the fandom itself, so I'm sure there's some stuff that I didn't mention here. I'd love to hear the experiences you guys have had though, because I honestly just found all of this stuff super fascinating. I think at the end of the day, Miraculous Ladybug is just one of those shows that you can't help loving despite its faults or wacky production. Whenever I describe this show to one of my friends who hasn't seen it, I always call it a car crash that you can't look away from. And I think that that's a pretty accurate description. And with that said, I'm going to end off today's video. If you'd like to see more videos like this in the future, why not subscribe and hit that bell icon to see when I upload. Special thank you to my top tier Patreons, Ambrose Rothwood, Brandon Nunes, Lee Taylor, Zachary Ansley, and Ken J. Weddington. Because of people like them, I can continue to make content like this. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Have an amazing day, everyone.